The thing that's very important to realize that there is a distinction between social work and public safety. Now I'm going to give you a case scenario, and I think that many of you will come to your own conclusion on this. Scenario: African American male, quite obviously having mental issues. Large African American male. A person who's wearing a dress. This is a real scenario too, by the way. Someone who I actually know. The very fact is that, how do you deal with that African American male?
Just a note that it's only 3 minutes time per person.
I will finish,
2 more minutes.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. Okay, and don't interrupt me, please. Now, with that said, if you react in the regular law enforcement way, that is an African American male. There may be some implicit bias, and I'm sure that you've went through some of the trainings in that. How you deal with that could be a life and death particular situation. Mental health plays a very critical role. You're not trained in that. But at the same time, I think it's important to realize that there are staff members that are involved. This is a budgetary issue as well. In many cases, basically public safety ends up taking precedence over mental health workers. There's a large turnover in terms of mental health workers, by the way. The very fact is that if you were working together to be able to come up with a coordinated way in terms of budget, rather than competing, and realizing that many of the issues may be mentally health related issues, then I think you will come up with a more equitable way of being able to deal with this individual who's 6 foot tall, wearing a dress, wearing a clown nose. But I want you to be aware, because it's important to realize that mental health is one of the major issues throughout this country. Please let me finish, because that's the point. And let me finish, sir. Let me finish. And then I will be finished in 2 minutes, or rather than 1 minute. Now, that's enough.
But it is part of my job to time you, sir.
Okay,
So
sir, let me finish.
1 minute and 30 seconds.
Let me finish. Now, it's rude for you to basically interrupt when I'm trying to basically come to a conclusion. Thank you, sir. Now, with that said, I think it's important to realize that if we are on the same page, that it's important to realize that mental health and public safety can be coordinated if we work together. And there are people in this room that represent that. But again, Mr. Chair, if you would allow me to say that it's important to be able to listen and at the same time be able to recognize this is a citizen that's been here for 60 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else public comment? You have 3 minutes, and I will time it a minute at a time.
All right, so I guess I will stick to my script.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Maria Moore. I'm the sister of Kayla Moore, and I'm pretty sure you all know who Kayla Moore is. So I'll just get right to it. If you want change, real change, in terms of mental health response, you will include my family in this conversation. Regarding your policy changes, however, I have a feeling that this is an empty gesture as a response to bad publicity. Your own newspapers have called you out as ineffective and ineffective. I am curious as to hear your response to that article. You had 6 years to get it right. Kayla was killed in 2013. After Kayla was killed, that was your chance to make real policy changes. What have we seen? Less CIT training for officers, 1 hour added to the hours of mobile crisis, and the police continue to be first responders to individuals in crisis. Then we have this unrealistic 120-day time frame regarding claims, which you intentionally delayed in the case. This PRC lied to me and my family when you said you would resolve this claim within 120 days. You had no intention of doing that. Yet you want to be seen as a legitimate body of checks and balances. However, you are biased. The purpose and mission of your commission is to protect your cops, and I must say you have done a stellar job. I had the opportunity to gain access to the files regarding Kayla's in-custody death, and my God, you dropped the ball. You failed her. Even when the results of the findings were leaked to the court, you continued to release to the press, you continued to do nothing to change the behavior of the cops, specifically Gwendolyn Brown. You are all props and cons of an administrative judge. We put our faith in you, but you did not make that call for her. In my heart and mind is still rational. I'm here to prevent the next death. I'm here for all the families who have mentally disabled loved ones. Kayla was fat, she was on drugs, she was poor, she was black, she was schizophrenic, and she was killed because of all those factors. Because that's all you cops saw. What the police did not know was that she was a daughter, she was a sister, she was an auntie. She did not deserve to die on that floor and left exposed and uncovered, while she was referred to as an it. She was, and still is, an it to you. Which is why nothing of value has been done, because the next it your cops kill will receive the same treatment. For all those families who are terrified to call for mental health assistance, I completely understand because the narrative is the same. 98% of the time, loved one is in crisis, families call the police arrive, and their loved one is killed by police. Unless there are witnesses with cameras, that will always be the outcome. Every day, it's the same story. Kayla was not killed by the gun, which is why we were left with you. Like I said, I'm willing to put my feelings aside and work with this commission. I do this for all the families who are suffering. We need alternatives that do not include cops as substitutions for mental health professionals. You have people in this room who are subject matter experts. Let us in on the conversation, but in changing policy as well, and how officers respond to people in crisis. Seeking alternatives to police when a person is experiencing mental illness, unless the situation is truly life-threatening. Inviting the police into a tense situation can lead to escalation and increase the harm to the individual in distress. Learning more about emotional CPR training, continuing to build networks of support with your community can be increased. The inadequacy of the emergency mental health system is producing lethal consequences for families across the country. You know, Kayla, her family misses her. She was a person, and I know I'm going to go against the limit, but I have to tell this story. My dad used to meet Kayla every day. He would walk to work, and she would take the bus to meet him at his job. 13 years, this was in 2013, and every day he would wave to her, and he would see her on the bus and meet her there. 6 years later, he still waves to that same bus. He knows she's not there, but it makes him feel good. You need to do something. You all sat here, and you lied to our family, and nothing happened. Don't let this happen again. I want to be included in the conversation. I want to help so that it doesn't happen. We have such great ideas. Let's implement it, loosen the budget strings, because we can make this really happen. Berkeley is an amazing city. I was born and raised here. Let's do better by our people who are mentally disabled.
I'm here primarily to identify what is happening with the crisis triage monies that were given by the state. Can't recall the exact amount, but it seems like it was something like 660-some thousand. That's not exactly the figure, perhaps a year for 3 years. I personally advocated, as well as the Mental Health Commission advocated, to get crisis triage monies to address these concerns, and I'd like to know the state of that, because that money was granted by the state. And second, I'm also interested in what's happening with the suicide prevention plan, because that is also a crisis issue that is major through our community. When I was on the Mental Health Commission, I know I, as an individual, made several PRA requests and found very high numbers of suicide attempts and suicide threats in Berkeley, and we brought that forward, asking for a consultant to address suicide prevention, and we were advised that a student was going to begin studying and there was going to be a suicide prevention plan implemented in the community, and I'd like to know the status of that as I sit here today. Because it's visible to all of us. I mean, if you go around the community, I saw someone today being 5150, the police, and the paramedics seem to be handling it fine as they were taking it away. I've seen many, many situations just walking down the street, whether it's near downtown. This situation was near campus, in South Berkeley. I've seen people screaming out and, that they needed assistance. I haven't seen any bad behavior, but that's just what I've personally observed. But there's no question in my mind, or nor should it be in anybody's, that there's major crisis going on throughout this community, that there needs to be increased crisis. There also needs to be a homeless outreach team that goes out after 5 o'clock, that doesn't work just business bankers hours. And thank you. So that's what I'm here to find out what's going on, what the update is.
Anyone else public comment?
Hi, Christine Schwartz. Nice to see you again. Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for coming today in this very important subject matter. I am concerned about what resources are out there to address a lot of the concerns that I've seen on the streets. Not on they're doing something wrong or they're doing too much, but rather, what is there? Why didn't they 5150 this individual? What's after the 5150? Are we able to encompass the need on the streets? Is there funding available for this? I personally think that when we answer a mental health call, that for safety reasons, for the mobile crisis team, that we need the officers there. I don't think we should take the police out of the equation. I don't think that's a smart idea at all. I think that would be a huge liability issue. But again, I'm interested in finding out, how do we answer these questions? And if we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else public comment? Seeing as there's none, thank you very much. Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so I also would agree with Russ and Maria, and I don't know the gentleman's name that left, but thank you both for speaking. And I also want to just know that there is alternatives that are actually in use that do effectively exclude the police. There's one example in Marin, and the way in which they exclude the police is because it's a partnership between peer workers and the Marin General Hospital. And the mental health calls go to them, they dispatch a peer worker alongside a clinician, and they're actually able to really effectively de-escalate these situations, and they have a 24-hour temporary hold in the emergency room that's been really effective, and as an alternative to places like John George, which can be actually really traumatizing for people, and they end up in a worse situation when they come out than when they entered those kinds of facilities. So not only does that need like a critical examination, what's actually going on in those facilities, what care is people being connected with, but then the other side of this is that the Marin approach also, which is funded, I believe, by a state grant that it wasn't like a prescriptive model, it was actually based in Marin. They were able to really build something that was connected with the services that existed in Berkeley, and I think that some collaborative work could be done to kind of facilitate those relationships here in our city in ways that would exclude the police, because oftentimes the sheer presence of the police when people are in these situations can escalate them, because some people, especially people that have been living on the streets, have trauma that they associate with police, whether or not the police are bad intentioned or too aggressive. Just their sheer presence can really escalate people in a negative way. Whereas the approach of a peer worker, who is somebody that has personal experience with mental health crisis, can actually really effectively de-escalate these